Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye
अष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु
नित्यं भागवत सेवया
नित्यं भागवत सेवया
भागवतोत्तमश्लोके
भागवत्युत्तमश्लोके
भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी
भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी.
By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, it becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama
Idam Bhagavatam Nama
Puranam Brahma Samhitam
Puranam Brahma Samhitam
Uttama Shloka Charitam
Uttama Shloka Charitam
Chakara Bhagavan Rishi
Chakara Bhagavan Rishi
Nishreyasaya Lokasya
Nishreyasaya Lokasya
Dhanyam Swasthaya Namaha.
Dhanyam Swasthaya Namaha.
The Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya
Sri Krishna Chaitanya
Prabhu Nityananda
Prabhu Nityananda
Sri Advaita Gadadhara
Sri Advaita Gadadhara
Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Hare Rama Hare Rama
Hare Rama Hare Rama
Rama Rama Hare Hare
Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Surabhyay Namaha
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 Om Surabhyay Namaha.
Mukham karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yatkripa tamaham bande Shri Gurum Dinataram yatkripa tamaham bande Shri Gurum Dinataram. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. We are continuing from Canto number 1, chapter 2, and today's text is number 4. It is 4, huh? Yes? We already recited this verse, but we will recite it again. Narayanam
Narayanam
Namaskritya
Namaskritya
Naram
Naram
Chaiva
Chaiva
Narotamam
Narotamam
Devim
Devim
Saraswatim
Saraswatim
Vyasam
Vyasam
Tato
Tato
Jayam
Jayam
Udirayat
Udirayet.
Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narotamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayam Udirayat
Tato Jayam Udirayet.
Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narotamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayam Udirayat
Tato Jayam Udirayet.
Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram chaiva narottamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayam Udirayet
Tato Jayam Udirayet Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayam Udirayet
Tato Jayam Udirayet
Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Chaiva Narottamam
Dharam Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayamudiraye
Tato Jayam Udirayet
Narayanam
Narayanam
The personality of Godhead
The personality of Godhead
Namaha Kritya
Namah Kritya
After offering respectful obeisances
After offering
Naram Chaiva
Naram Chaiva
and Narayana Rishi
and Narayan Rishi
Nara Uttamam
Naruttamam
the supermost human being
the supermost human being
Devim
Devim
the goddess
the goddess
Saraswatim
Saraswatim
the mistress of learning
learning
Vyasam
Vyasam
Veda Vyasa
Vedavyas
Vyasadeva
Vyasadeva
yeah Tataha
Tataha
thereafter
thereafter
Jayam
Jayam
all that is meant
all that is meant
for conquering
for conquering
Udirayat
Udirayet
he be announced be announced. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Kindly repeat after me. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam,
before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam
which is the very means of conquest,
which is the very means of conquest
one should offer respectful obeisances
one should offer respectful obeisances
unto the personality of Godhead,
unto the personality of Godhead
Narayana,
Narayana
unto Narayana Rishi,
unto Narayan Rishi
the supermost human being,
the supermost human being
unto Mother Saraswati,
unto Mother Saraswati
the goddess of learning,
the goddess of learning
and unto Srila Vyasadeva,
and unto Sri Vyasadeva
the author.
the author.
Purport. All the Vedic literatures and the Puranas are meant for conquering the darkest region of material existence. The living being is in the state of forgetfulness of his relation with God due to his being overly attracted to material sense gratification from time immemorial. His struggle for existence in the material world is perpetual, and it is not possible for him to get out of it by making plans. If he at all wants to conquer this perpetual struggle for existence, he must re-establish his eternal relation with God. And one who wants to adopt such remedial measures must take shelter of literatures such as the Vedas and the Puranas. Foolish people say that the Puranas have no connection with the Vedas. However, the Puranas are supplementary explanations of the Vedas intended for different types of men. All men are not equal. There are men who are conducted by the mode of goodness, others who are under the mode of passion, and others who are under the mode of ignorance. The Puranas are so divided that any class of men can take advantage of them and gradually regain their lost position and get out of the hard struggle for existence. Srila Sutta Goswami shows the way of chanting the Puranas. This may be followed by persons who aspire to be preachers of the Vedic literatures and the Puranas. Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless Purana, and it is especially meant for them who desire to get out of the material entanglement permanently. Translation again. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. One of the very important verses of the Bhagavatam, as we know, we recite every day before actually reciting the Bhagavatam. It is one of chosen or selected verses that explain how we should approach the Bhagavatam, that helps us to remember the primary focus or the essence of the Bhagavatam, which is the Supreme Lord, here referred to as Narayana. Of course, in the Bhagavatam we come to understand how they're different incarnations, different representations of the Lord, making reference to an incarnation of the Lord, Narayana Rishi, Mother Saraswati, and then, of course, the author, Srila Vyasadeva. So in the purport, at least 3 times in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes reference to the hard struggle that all of us undergo, and he also uses the word perpetual. So that is why we hear our acharyas speak about nitya baddha, eternally conditioned. Perpetually we struggle in the material world, and this struggle will continue perpetually as long and until we come in contact with proper knowledge. From Bhagavad Gita itself, that very well known verse also is directly explaining what is our hard struggle in the material world. Mamai vangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manasastrani indriyani prakriti stani karsati. This word karsati means struggle. We are struggling with our mind. We are struggling with our senses. We're struggling with our material mind and our material senses. And there is no exception. Everyone who is in the material world is in this way conditioned in different ways and at different levels. that's also mentioned in the purport. Some people are more under the influence. I mean, most people don't even know that there are three gunas. They don't even know. I mean, at least when we begin to read Bhagavad Gita and come in contact with the Vedic literatures, we begin to understand, even though it's not at all easy to no longer be influenced by the modes of material nature. But it is those modes of material nature that are keeping us very tightly bound or conditioned in this material world. In the purport, of course, Srila Prabhupada underlines the absolute necessity and need for such conditioned souls to come in contact, especially with the Vedas. Vedas, we refer to them as books of knowledge, but they're not just ordinary religious books. They're not ordinary books. They're an ordinary book. And not only that, but Vedic literatures are of a category of their own. They are different from other religious scriptures that at different times in the history of mankind are revealed. Just like the Quran, the Bible, and other such literatures, they're not eternal teachings. They refer to some eternal basic principles, but they have been spoken at a particular time to a particular audience, particular group of people in the history. Vedic literatures are not like that. One may say, well, Bhagavad Gita was spoken 5,000 years ago to a particular audience, Arjuna, one member of the audience. But we come to know, if we read the Bhagavad Gita, if we hear what Krishna explains, that this is not the first time he's speaking the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? So Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of the Vedic knowledge, is an eternal literature, and that is why the teachings, Vedic teachings, are referred to as Sanatan Dharma. And this point being made here also in the purport regarding, some people telling, well, the Puranas are different, they're not so important, they're not actually the Vedas. But that's clarified by many of our acharyas and clarified here also by Srila Prabhupada, that the Puranas are an extension of the original Vedas, and they are also divided into basically three categories. There are 18 major Puranas, and 6 are for those persons in the mode of goodness, 6 for those in the mode of passion, and 6 for those in the mode of ignorance. So in this way, Vedic literature, there is something for everyone, regardless of one's position. The idea is that one should follow Shastra, one should follow authority. When we agree to follow Shastra, then we begin to develop the proper mood and mentality of being submissive, isn't it? Of understanding our position of dependency, of understanding that there is some higher authority. And of course, gradually one will come to understand that highest authority, naturally, is described in those literatures that are in the higher modes of nature, is the mode of goodness. And of all of those literatures, the Bhagavad Purana stands out as the most glorified and the most glorious of literatures. So, in many places, of course, in the Bhagavatam, we are being reminded of the greatness of the Bhagavatam and how the Bhagavatam is, especially for those not only in the mode of goodness in the beginning. You will recall those who were here for the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter of the Bhagavatam. It is Srila Vyasadeva is explaining that actually the Srimad Bhagavatam is for the Paramahamsas, not only for people in the mode of goodness, for the Paramahamsas, or those who are desiring to become completely freed and liberated from all kinds of activities that will keep us entangled here in the material world. So in this way, the Srimad Bhagavatam is that literature which will take us very quickly to the proper understanding of the absolute truth, and that will be nicely explained or detailed in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Reference is being made here to Mother Saraswati, how such knowledge that is revealed in the Bhagavatam, or for that matter throughout the Vedic literatures, is especially meant for those who will not be misusing this knowledge. In other words, knowledge that's partially why this reference is being made here to Mother Saraswati. There's a particular shloka that is spoken by Mother Saraswati. Mother Saraswati is the goddess of learning, and she is instructing, I forget the context actually, she is instructing one Brahmana that, my dear Brahmana, please don't give me to anybody and everybody. Don't divulge or don't share or don't distribute this knowledge that you are receiving to those who are undeserving, which is a foundational principle actually in Vedic education, that a teacher will not instruct a student unless he is absolutely convinced that that student is qualified to hear and that he will not misuse this knowledge. So knowledge is also just like the Kshatriyas, they have their, Astra, no? Their weapons. Shastra is a kind of weapon, very powerful weapon also, and therefore a part of the Vedic practice is to share this knowledge. Only it's a major, we can say, difference of approach. If we look at modern day education, knowledge is distributed for money and to anybody. Anyone who pays the price can take the course, isn't it? And get a diploma. But Vedic approach is not at all like that. Knowledge in modern day understanding, common understanding is that, and people or governments, they will advertise in this way, that education or knowledge is everyone's right. You have a right, isn't it? But Vedic culture is different. You don't have a right. Education is not a right. Knowledge is not a right. Knowledge is a privilege. Just like bhakti, devotional service. The opportunity to practice devotional service is not a right. It's a privilege. One cannot force oneself. One cannot, if one joins a temple, for example, he can only remain in that temple as long as he follows the rules and regulations. One, to stay in a temple or to stay also within this practice of devotional service, one must deserve. So in this way, actually, when we analyze so many things, practically everything, in terms of the Vedic culture, whether it is education, whether it is politics or economics, there's a very different approach and different understanding. And that's why initially, for those who have not been exposed to the Vedic understanding or Vedic culture, initially it is somewhat difficult. Why is it difficult? Actually, because we are on this bodily platform, mental platform, because our consciousness is not purified, isn't it? And therefore, as soon as we begin to cultivate this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, then we easily come to understand that our problems in the material world are due to this constant association. Means we are governed by our material mind and our material senses, and therefore, as long as the living entity remains on that platform or that level, one's struggle for existence will simply continue. And that's why when sometimes devotees would ask Srila Prabhupada, how long does it take, how long is it going to take me, or how long does it take to become like liberated? And when somebody asks that question, normally he means, how many years or how many lifetimes? And Prabhupada's answer would be a second. Even in the material world, those who are dealing with mental issues, psychologists, they have come to understand that actually they'll tell their patients, you just have to change your mindset. You have the wrong mindset. If you change your mindset, your problems will not be there. And actually Krishna consciousness means that, changing from a material mind to spiritual mind, material intelligence to spiritual intelligence. All of us in the material world, we have the same problem. We have a material body, we have a false ego, we have a material mind and material intelligence. It's a question of how we, as nicely instructed actually, especially in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, if we read that chapter closely and regularly, Krishna very nicely opens all of that understanding, gives all of that understanding actually to Arjuna. Because Arjuna's the dilemma was that he allowed himself to think materially, to consider things, from a material angle. Of course, Prabhupada mentions that because he's a devotee, compassionate to, did not want to kill people, especially those who are very, close and dear to him, like his guru, Dronacharya and Bhishmadev. I mean, the elderly and and so many others. But ultimately, it was a weakness that Krishna explains as he, through the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, elaborates on this point. So it means that ourselves as devotees also, if we're not cautious, because Maya is so powerful, we are living in the kingdom of Maya. So, as Prabhupada says, it's like a razor's edge. Material world, if you're not attentive, you get caught by Maya. Even one of the roaming senses is enough to take one away from the path of devotional service. So that's why Bhagavad Gita is explained as the most profound book on psychology. You don't have to go to, the greatest psychologist is Krishna. He's the greatest philosopher, the greatest psychologist, the greatest educator, the greatest politician, right? The greatest politician, and the greatest economist also. Yeah, because all of these are standard sciences that are very, very scientific, very very deep, and they make up the essence of what we call Vedic knowledge. So this is the choice that we have by coming in contact and regularly hearing these topics from the Bhagavatam. It will give us the understanding and the clue how to get out of our hard struggle for existence. So it should be of comfort to all of us that actually, and to people, to everyone in the material world, that there is a process by which anyone and everyone can actually bring a total stop to one's, especially nowadays people are mentally, it is mentioned that mental health or stress is one of the major, especially since the last 10 months, since lockdown. People have become locked down mentally. And also it has affected, because anything that, anything that we allow the mind to disturb us has a direct effect on the body. Anyone with medical background here? No one studying medicine? No? Okay. So it is known by the, medical profession that something like 70% of your illness is mentally caused. And of course nowadays people have a lot of reason to be mentally disturbed, because the whole situation is so confusing and so difficult. And also, to add to all of that, our lifestyle is making us unhealthy physically as well. The whole modern, it's easy to understand, isn't it? The whole modern approach, the whole modern ideology of, stressing materialism, bodily comfort, material enjoyment, is simply keeping us and further bringing us down and entangling us on the bodily platform in terms of our material senses, in terms of our material mind and material intelligence. And the Vedic knowledge or Vedic literatures are telling us the opposite. As soon as you reduce, regulate, minimize, stop, Vedic literature begins by you regulate your sense gratification. But actually the ultimate goal is you stop. You stop altogether sense gratification. You regulate sex life. But the goal actually, you stop like a sex life. Tell that to people in America. Or in so-called advanced countries. The whole idea is that stop your entanglement in this material world, or you can only stop that entanglement by disconnecting, so to speak, with the material mind and the material senses. And that is only possible if we are fortunate enough to be introduced to something that is beyond the material mind, material intelligence. And that is, of course, our original spiritual self, where there is spiritual intelligence, where we function, we learn to function on a completely different platform, which Krishna explains actually in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita also, that as soon as we come to that platform, we immediately become unaffected by the threefold miseries of life. We are no longer affected or disturbed by it's too hot today, or it's too cold today, or whatever the material world is constantly bringing us, isn't it? It becomes not only secondary, but it no longer disturbs one who actually develops that consciousness. And that is what Arjuna was asking Krishna, as Krishna is explaining about, you're not this body, and all of these people who will die, actually it's only the body that's dying, because they're not this body, they're spirit, souls, etc. And Krishna is therefore referring to this higher level of understanding, and Arjuna is asking, what are the symptoms of someone who is on that level? And one of them that Krishna, at the end of the second chapter, actually we should always bring the Bhagavad Gita also. I was thinking about it last few days. Whoever brings the Bhagavatam cannot bring the Bhagavatam, unless Bhagavad Gita is also there. So at the end of the second chapter, Krishna explains that actually only those who are done with material, with desires of sense gratification, only those who are done, who no longer have any kind of material desire, because jnanis also, they may not be, they're on the mental platform. And number three, only when we are done with a sense of proprietorship. This is my home, this is my wife, this is my country, my, me and my, yeah. And number four, only when we are done with, or we are no longer affected by, the ahankara, false ego. So like this, if we hear, and we are being reminded all the time, we have to continuously hear these instructions from Shastra, or instructions from our acharyas. Then if we apply that knowledge that we are receiving, then we can actually, nothing prevents us. We only prevent ourselves. We cannot, in other words, we cannot blame anyone else for where we are today, either physically, psychologically, or spiritually. We are, we have the tools, so to speak. And that's why in the Bhagavatam, that nice verse, Nate vidu swartagatim hi Vishnu. Nate vidu. Generally, people do not know. Swartagatim, swa-artha. Gatim, that in this human form of life, we have what is needed to actually resolve all of our problems. Our problems being connected with our material mind, material intelligence, and material senses. And so therefore in Krishna consciousness we learn to use those tools by purifying them and dovetailing for the service and for the pleasure of Krishna. So that's how the Bhagavatam continuously is reminding us and stressing this as well. Yeah. I will read the verse again for those who are not here at the beginning. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, we should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Anything from any of our illustrious members in the audience? Now nobody's going to raise their hand. Yes.
Good morning. This is in regards to question 2 days before you were giving a class.
2 days ago.
2 days ago.
Not 2 years.
2 days ago. So you were mentioning that the role of guru. Then this question strikes in my mind that does the guru takes the responsibility of a candidate, sincere candidate who is, for sincerity also we can't define by sincerity, but a sincere candidate is that he is struggling. Does the guru take the responsibility of delivering that disciple, not only in this life or whatever?
Does the spiritual master take responsibility of delivering his sincere disciple,
Yes.
not only in this life but in the next life? That's the question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is the primary role and responsibility of guru. In other words, when one accepts a disciple or when one accepts a guru, there is a contract. Now it may not be, as we normally see or understand contract, sign on the dotted line, but there is a contract which is, we could say, verbalized at the time of initiation, you see, whereby the disciple in a public forum, we have jagyas in temples, so before the fire, before the deities, before Vaishnavas like that, in public, formally, agrees to follow these rules and regulations, and that is the contract being verbalized, that I am promising to follow these guidelines and these instructions that you are giving. So in as much as the disciple makes that kind of promise or oath, the spiritual master also, it is understood, promises to deliver such a disciple. Yeah. That is the meaning of initiation. The guru, the spiritual master, of course, he is connected in Guru Parampara, so he takes on the charge of the responsibility of helping that particular individual who formally agrees to follow him to be delivered from this material world. Of course, it is Mukunda, the original Mukunda, Krishna, who is awarding liberation. That is happening through the process of surrendering and Guru Parampara. Yeah.
Again, one more thing, Guru, in this. In terms of sincerity of a disciple.
Ah. Now the question comes. What about those who are not sincere?
So actually, it sometimes it was a little difficult to ascertain who is sincere, who is not sincere, because sometimes a devotee could sincerely practice for some time, and later on, it could be due to lust, or it could be due to especially false ego, as you were mentioning now. Because of that, he may fall down little bit. It could be for this entire life also sometimes.
Yeah.
Like that. But now outwardly we see that now he is not sincere. Outwardly.
Yes.
So, but how one can ascertain, like how exactly we can define sincerity is? Because for some time definitely has practiced.
To determine or to ascertain whether one is sincere or not is the responsibility of the spiritual master. Once you'll become a spiritual master, you will understand. Actually, the spiritual master will endeavor and always be desiring and also always be inclined to give opportunities to a disciple, even though at times, as we see in the history, in our own history within ISKCON as well, disciples leaving, even proper disciples, some of the early disciples, and even afterwards. One may think, well, how can anyone leave Srila Prabhupada? But some people who were initiated by Srila Prabhupada, either in the very early stages, for example, at the beginning, Prabhupada didn't have that many rules and regulations. Chanting was there in the 4 basic rules, but at one point, some some devotees who came to India, they came to know that, we have to shave our head, and then we have to bow down, You have to offer dandavats, right, to Guru, to the spiritual master. So in the very early beginning, when this bowing, for some disciples, some people who became disciples of Srila Prabhupada, when this started to happen, because it didn't happen from day one. Like when Prabhupada went to New Vrindavan in the early days, Prabhupada was standing in line, to go to the bathroom. Prabhupada had to wash his own everything, So the idea is that not everything was immediately introduced. When Prabhupada, in the beginning, nobody knew how to cook Indian dishes, and probably nobody knew how to cook anything. So Prabhupada was cooking, and then when Prabhupada announced that, okay, next Sunday we're going to have our first love feast, and the main feature of the love feast will be prasadam. So there were those very early disciples who came. They knew how wonderful was the food that Prabhupada was preparing. As a matter of fact, they would come every day. Prabhupada would sit with them. He would cook. He would serve them. Prabhupada would serve them prasadam. One time, Stephen, who became later on Satsvarup, and prasadam was every day at 1 o'clock. No, or 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. So one day he was working actually somewhere, and that day his boss told him, you have to stay an hour more. So he thought to himself, my God, that means I can't go for prasadam, because by the time I come back, it will be finished. So he picked up the phone and he called Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, can you save me a plate of prasadam? Yes. So when Prabhupada organized the first Sunday feast, love feast, many people came, and Prabhupada had cooked, like a 12-course, 15-course meal. I mean, many items, 12, 15 different items. Wonderful prasadam, because everything was cooked in ghee also. And then, this like early days, nobody knows anything. So everyone was nicely taking prasadam. After finishing prasadam, everybody left. Prabhupada had to clean up and wash the dishes, wash everything. So the idea is that initially one may not understand, but of course the spiritual master understands the heart of a disciple. Sincerity has to do with the heart, you see. And therefore, similar to Krishna, Krishna never forsakes anyone, even the biggest rascal. Krishna always giving opportunity to be, because ultimately everyone is Krishna's devotee. So because the spiritual master is the representative of Krishna, so he will also be having that same mood and mentality. Regardless of one being sincere or not, anyone who has begun the process of bhakti, he is already considered liberated. He may stop being sincere, you see. How to be sincere? Just be sincere. Prabhupada would explain. Just be sincere. It's a question of, of desire. So, as Krishna is most merciful, then the spiritual master who is representing Krishna is also merciful. Yeah. Any other? Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki